What's going on, guys? J-Bon with Bones and Stones. Wanted to do a little riff video today talking about some thoughts I've been having with Flesh and Blood. Had our first draft for Outsiders over the weekend, and it was great. Had a lot of fun. Mr. Klug did a little bit better than I did, so shout out to him. But I was taking a look at the Majestics in Outsiders, and then kind of looking back at the Majestics in Uprising as well. And I think I've noticed, I don't want to say a trend, but there's something that made me start thinking about the way that LSS is making generic cards specifically. You have these cards now that 2/6 and but they block for 2, and you look at like something like a Raise Face and Uprising. It's 2 pitch, can swing really heavy for 6 damage, but it only blocks for 2. When you go back to the earlier sets, you start to see these Majestics that are just substantially more powerful. You start to see these generic cards that are more powerful. And for me, and I've said this for a while, Flesh and Blood, because it's such a hero and class oriented game, generic cards have the potential to be really, really dangerous. And dangerous in the sense that they're really, really powerful. And I think that if careful planning is not in place with the generic cards, then they can cause problems down the line, or potentially be in the meta or something, for example, longer than LSS may have anticipated. And it kind of gets back to the concept of Magic, where you have the Power 9. You have these 9 cards that are clearly more powerful than pretty much anything else on their own. And what makes them so good, like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really powerful cards in Magic, but a lot of times newer cards and cards that came after the Power 9, they're really good in specific scenarios or specific decks or archetypes or colors. They're not generically really good. So if you take that concept with Flesh and Blood, it kind of comes back to, okay, well then what we're really talking about is generic cards. And there's a couple cards I want to go through, and there's some cards I kind of want to talk about that don't make my list, at least in my opinion, but you could argue are quote Power 9 of Flesh and Blood. But if we look at these cards, we're going to get started. Light and Strike, you find it in Welcome to Wraith, and I believe History Pack 1. But you have a card here with 0 pitch, swings for 5, can block for 3, and gives you 3 choices to choose from. And the only downside to this card is that you have to get rid of a card from your hand. So, or you put it, and not even that, you're just putting it on the bottom of your deck. So if you get this card early in the game, it may not even be technically a non-issue. And it just gives you a lot of options, a lot of power, and you can block with it. There's a lot of stuff you can do with it, and it's generic. So it fits with any card. And if you look at like Art of War, another generic card, and from Arcane Rising, 1 pitch, you can pitch it for 2. Yeah, you can't block with it, but you give your next attack go again, or all your attack action cards gain +1 attack or defense, depending when you play the card. And you can banish an attack action card from your hand and then draw 2 cards. There's this card, in my opinion, is just insane. Like, absolutely insane card. And since it's generic, it can be pretty much useful for just about anybody. And then the same goes for Command and Conquer. You have a 2 pitch card that can swing for 6, kind of similar to a Raise Face, but it has 3 you can block for 3. Raise Face only blocks for 2. And defense reaction cards can't be played to the chain link. And if it hits a hero, you destroy all their cards in their arsenal. I mean, this is devastating to a hero, it's like an archer class hero, specifically, at least right now. But down the line, this could still pose a problem. And that's why it's insanely powerful. And if you look at the Majestics they're making now, they're clearly toned back. And these are the 3 big examples, in my opinion. There's a couple other cards out there, but again, they fall into an archetype or a class type, and that's why I don't really count them, because they're not generic. They can't be applied to anything. Next, we're going to get into the legendaries. It's kind of interesting, but like Crown of Providence, you have a generic, and if you block with it, you can put a card from your hand or your arsenal at the bottom of the deck, and if you do, you get to draw a card. So not only can you block for 2, which is pretty decent, and yeah, it's got Blade Break, so it's gone after that, but you can block with it and make a move. If you have a bad card, something you want to get rid of. So it really sets you up for your next turn if you block with it. Or it could set you up, and it prevents 2 damage, or it could. So really, really good legendary. That's, again, generic. Arcanite Skullcap kind of follows suit. It can block once, if you have less health, you get that 1 block back, but then you can also block for 3 arcane by paying 3 pitch. And yeah, that's a little bit of a steep cost, but if you're, if you're going against a deck that deals a lot of arcane, you can really slow them down. And yeah, you'll slow yourself down, but you can put yourself into a good position and hold out longer purely because of this card. And yeah, it gets battle worn, but it doesn't have blade break, so it can stay. So you can keep this guy going and blocking him with arcane barrier, which is just kind of crazy when you really think about it. And then finally, if you said why is it not first on the list, but we have the elephant in the room, which is Fendel's Tunic. You have a card here. Yeah, it has blade break, but it only blocks for 1. But I mean, geez, literally every 3 turns, and starting on turn 1, you put a counter on it, you get a freaking pitch out of it. So you're basically getting a free pitch every 3 turns as long as you use it whenever you have it. That's just crazy. And I don't think they're going to continue making cards like this. You might see legendaries, but even the legendaries, I think they're going to start to push them more into archetypes, especially since they're going to be adding more heroes to the same archetypes, is my theory, in the future. I mean, you're going to get another Prism, basically, in Dusk Till Dawn. So Prism's cards and Illusion cards are going to be reusable. But I don't count those as super crazy, quote, power 9s, because they're not generic. And I really think that the era of these kinds of Majestics, I don't think you're going to see anything like this really anymore. It just doesn't seem to be something that I think they anticipated them being that good, especially, we're already on our 8th or 9th expansion, which is a crazy thought. But I think that you're going to start to see more Majestics that have drawbacks, and you're going to start to see good cards that have drawbacks or they're muted in some other fashion. So the long-term prospect of these cards, as long as these guys don't get outright banned, these guys are going to hold their value. I mean, they're going to be extremely useful until and if and when they get banned, which I can see them, retiring heroes, but unless a bad loop comes out or something happens that you can exploit, I don't see them banning these cards. And the beautiful thing with the legendaries is that they're designed to keep them for your future heroes and things like that. But a generic legendary, I think you're going to start to see less of them. And I know Crown of Providence here was a Uprising card, or an Uprising, in the Uprising set. So it's definitely newer. It's not as good, in my opinion, as some of the older ones. But it's still really freaking good. And I just have a suspicion that as time goes on, these kinds of generic cards are really going to hold their value. And there's some lesser cards on the list. I mean, you could argue like Snatch. It's zero pitch, 4 attack. If you hit, you get to draw a card. It's a rare. And then you have like Sink Below, really, really strong blocking card. I just personally, and then there's all the other, there's Crown of Seeds, and there's Storm Striders and all these other things. But the problem with those is that they're specific to a class. So that's why I personally don't count them. I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting thing. I just kind of want to talk about it. If anyone wants to comment what their opinions are, what do you guys think the long-term prospect of these OG super powerful Majestics are? Let me know down below. Let me know if there's any cards that you think should be included in the Power 9 of Flesh and Blood. Because currently I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Get the Power 6 right now. So if there's anything else that you think should make the list, let me know down below. And tell me what else you guys want to talk about. Down for anything. See you next time, guys.